Hey everybody, I hope and pray that you're doing well today as we come to our word from the Word. And today that word is liable. Liable. Now we know that in terms of insurance and in terms of placing the blame. And that's exactly what we're going to see today in Exodus chapter 5. Now, even in kind of in my notes, even for this video and looking at this passage, it's one thing that I think should stand out to all of us. That just because the Lord has called us to something, just because he has given us a clear word of what we are to do, so in the case of Moses and Aaron, just because we have received that word from the Lord and we know exactly what's coming, we've had that experience, but others have not. They're not automatically going to jump on board. Now, of course, this is true for Pharaoh and the enemy, that they're not going to just automatically jump on. And then also the people of Israel, too, the Israelites, the Hebrews, that at this point, just because they have heard what he said, they're not automatically going to be praising Moses for what's going on. You see that happen in this chapter. So essentially, as always, I encourage you to read the whole chapter for yourself, but as Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and the famous line, right? Pharaoh, let my people go. It's what God said, let my people go. And Pharaoh doesn't even know who this Yahweh is. Like, who is he that I'm even supposed to be listening to him? Well, it wasn't going to be long. Pharaoh was going to really be introduced to who Yahweh not only was, but who Yahweh is. And so, in kind of retaliation, Pharaoh says, look, the only reason that you're asking to go worship this God is because you're lazy. And so, all this time we've been making you make all these bricks. And so now what we're going to do is, instead of providing the straw and then asking you to make bricks, now we're just going to ask you, or not ask you, make you go get the straw yourselves. And then you can come back and make the bricks. And don't worry, we're not going to cut you any slack. You've still got to build the same number of bricks. Yes, this is like, sometimes you see this in the production world as well. It's like, hey, we want you to build more product with less material. Right? You want to, even farmers, right? We want a greater harvest, but we're going to give you less seed. And some of these things you say, well, wait a minute, it doesn't add up. It's not fair. But Pharaoh is blaming it all on their laziness. Then the people of Israel, especially the Israel, kind of the leaders who were kind of like the foremen of some of these groups, they come to Pharaoh and he tells them, well, it's because you're lazy. Well, they come right out of meeting with Pharaoh, and that's where we're going to pick up today. Exodus chapter 5, verses 19 through 21. And the officers of the children of Israel saw that they were in trouble after it was said, you shall not reduce any bricks from your daily quota. Then, as they came out from Pharaoh, they met Moses and Aaron, who stood there to meet them. And they said to them, let the Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us aberrant in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to kill us. Now, as you continue reading on and even into the beginning of the next chapter, and we may deal with that next week, but Moses has very much the same sentiment, except he doesn't blame himself, he blames God. And isn't that just like all of us, right? When anything happens outside of what our plan is, outside, we were talking about this Wednesday night, outside of what we think the will of God should be. I mean, you imagine Moses, even after he's heard that Pharaoh's not going to listen, he's still like, why didn't Pharaoh listen? Well, I can imagine this going on. Well, it's probably because I'm not a good speaker. It's probably because, he shouldn't have called me anyway. And he even says that to God here in the next verses. Why did you call me anyway? Why did you send me? And that goes back to what we talked about yesterday. But in other words, everybody's looking for someone to blame when things don't go perfectly according to their plans. We do it when things don't go according to our plans. Pharaoh blames the laziness of the people when they're not building more bricks and the fact that they even asked to leave. The Israelites blame Moses because he was the one that even brought it up in the first place, the chance to leave. So even though it came from God, Moses is getting the blame. And so Moses will be quick to pass it on and blame God. Well, who is to blame? All right, because somebody's got to be held liable for the pain and the suffering that is going on against these Hebrews. Well, the truth be told, and if you stick around for the story, you find out that God knows who to hold accountable. Pharaoh can try to put the blame wherever he wants, but Pharaoh's heart was hard against God already. His heart is going to continue to be harder and harder, even though he sees the miracles that God is doing. And it is because, in part, that he wanted the power and he wanted the people to be working and serving him, not any other God. And isn't that what the world will do today? Is that they put us down and they try to blame, they'll blame other religions. I mean, they'll blame Christians, right? They'll look at Christians and say, it is your fault. You're lazy, and it's your pastor's fault, and it's your God's fault that you're going through all these things. And we start listening to them, and then we turn to our leaders and say, how could you dare ask me to do this? How could you dare ask me to live a holy life? How could you ask me to to abstain from doing things that the world would have me to do? And as a congregation or as people of God, we will blame our pastors and we will blame our leaders and we will blame anybody and everybody that we can. But then, right, that comes to the pastors or the leaders, and then what do? Right? We look and say, why am I getting fussed at? And so it's God who told me. And so we begin to blame God, and we begin to ask God, why are we even here? What are you doing? See, this isn't something that just happened one time in Egypt. This happens over and over again, and it happens in relationships. It happens in our families. It happens in friendships. It happens in our jobs. It happens in anything that we try to do godly, that the enemy will sow seeds of doubt so that we act like Moses and we act like the people of Israel, and we say there's got to be somebody to blame. Just like I've said this many times, right, that Adam did not take on responsibility in the garden, and he blamed not just the woman, he blamed God for giving him the woman. He says, the one who sinned, he said, it was that woman you gave to me. So he wasn't as much blaming Eve as he was blaming God. Moses goes on to pretty much blame God for even having him there in the first place to cause this pain. Now, having said all of that today, what do we need to take from this? Who can be held liable? Because it's got to be somebody. Well, I want to encourage you and also remind you that when God speaks, and you hear it, and you know what God has you to do, he never said it was going to be easy. And yes, there are times that following and obedience is easy. And there's times where it is extremely difficult. But he says, he reminds us in his word, right, that we need to continue on, not lose heart. Don't lose heart. Stay faithful, stay the course, keep your eyes fixed on him, right? You will reap what you sow if you do not lose heart. Galatians 6:9. Today, will you focus on what he has before you? Will you focus on the word and the faithfulness that you know you have in him? The faith that you know you can. I'm trying to even find the words to say it. Hold on tightly to him. Have faith in him that his way is best. And even though it looks like the enemy is making things harder, and even though it may look like those who meant something for good, it seems like they're tearing you down, remember, anybody else could mean it for evil, but God means it for good. And with that, who can be held liable? We hold God accountable. You say, wait a minute, how do we hold God accountable? God is in control. So if you want to blame God, blame him, but blame him in a way that gives him credit and gives him glory and gives him praise. Not like Moses saying, why did you call me here? Instead, let's change that and say, God, thank you for calling me here. Now help me to understand what you're doing. God, I know you're in control. And God, what he could have said, God, I know that you're allowing the Egyptians to make this more difficult, but help us to be strong. Help us to be faithful. Not blaming everybody else. So today, I'll just end with this thought. Just change the blame into praise. And when we change that perspective and change that attitude, I believe we'll all be surprised in how our circumstances, even though the circumstances will not change, our presence in those circumstances will. God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.